Stand by. You're up.
All right, welcome to the show, World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline USA Radio Network. I'm Nick Eber. Pleasure to be with you each and every weeknight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Sports Byline. I'm here with Danny Page today, as I am just about every day that he decides not to take the day off. Danny,
lucky you, Nick. Lucky you. No days off here for D Page. Always a pleasure to be with you. And today, we're talking some MLS, really getting into our MLS coverage. Here we go. I'm ready.
Yeah, we're going to mix it up a bit today. We're going to talk a little MLS football. Of course, it is always worthy of discussion as we get ready for the new season. And there are a lot of stories, Danny, that are sort of percolating in the MLS world. And we're going to be joined by Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer, the editor of MLS on foxsoccer.com. First time on the show. It's going to be great to have Kyle on, talk a little Major League Soccer. Again, need to support the league and get into it. And there's a lot worth looking at in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, a lot to talk about tonight. We want you guys to be involved with the show. Give us a call, 800-878-PLAY. That's 800-878-PLAY. Or send us a tweet at World Soccer Radio. I'll be slaving over the Twitter machine tonight, and we'll provide your thoughts on air.
Yeah, also, we are going to take a little bit of time, though, and talk about the situation at Arsenal right now. We've talked about Man United. We've talked about Liverpool, City, Chelsea. But, you know, we need to talk about Arsenal because there's another manager there that I am starting to take a different approach to. You heard me yesterday in the last few days say that I thought David Moyes was out of his league as much as I support David Moyes. But I'm changing my tune on Arsene Wenger, and it's just possible I might be falling into the Piers Morgan column if you thought that was even possible. But anyway, listen, we want to hear from you. 800-878-PLAY, 800-878-PLAY, at World Soccer Radio. That's at World Soccer Radio on Twitter. Of course, big hello to our men and women in uniform serving around the world listening on American Forces Radio. Also, those listening on the affiliate stations of the Sports Byline USA Radio Network. Of course, if you're listening on TuneIn.com or iHeartRadio, or watching our beautiful mugs on stream at watchwsr.com. We love to do this, and we're, once again, every weeknight, 9 p.m. We are your only syndicated radio source for the global game here in the United States. There are imitators, but this, my friends, this is the original.
You crack me up, man. You know, I'm like sitting over here over your shoulder doing some dances.
That's
the biggest thing about this show. We just love it. We love to have some fun.
That's right.
Some fun talking football.
And, of course, it works best when you participate. So Twitter at World Soccer Radio, or even Facebook. Do we do that anymore, Danny? I don't know. Anyway, we've got to go to break. We'll be right back after this. Oh, I just love Echo and the Bunnymen. One of my absolute favorites. And the great thing, I may have told you this, Danny, the great thing about Echo and the Bunnymen was the last time I saw them in concert was like 1981, or maybe 1980. And then they had a reunion tour just last year when they played the exact same album that they played when I saw them in 1980. It's like 30 years apart. All right, wake up. It's not electronic dance music, I know.
Sorry.
All right, welcome back to the show, World Soccer Radio.
I'm out there for a minute.
I'm Nick Geber. Danny is a My Little Pony, and I am wearing pants today to make it all the better for everybody out there in Radio Land. So, Danny, we are going to be joined here in just a few moments by Kyle McCarthy.
Good dude.
Going to
Looking
call us
forward
in.
to chatting with him.
And we're really going to get into some little MLS peek at what's coming up, and we're going to talk about some of the stories, the recurring stories going on in this MLS offseason. Some of them are quite big, by the way, and I think will continue to be stories going on. But in the meantime, Danny, I want to spend this segment, before we get to MLS, talking about Arsene Wenger, legendary manager, a winning manager, a manager I have enormous respect for on so many different levels. But, we have reached an impasse, I think, with Arsene Wenger. Well, I can tell you, Danny, I think he's lost the plot.
Well, I'm not sure. I think the question is here, do you think he's lost the plot, or do you think he should be let go? I'm not sure if bringing in a new manager is exactly what Arsenal want. But, I really had to, over these last couple days, start to agree with none other than 4 million Twitter followers himself, Piers Morgan. Yeah. And a lot of Piers Morgan's tweets. And I know Piers is a very polarizing figure. But can I read a couple of these, Nick, that I'm looking at here? By the way, everybody's tweets are coming into us. We got about a half dozen to get to already. We'll get to that shortly. Here's one from Piers earlier today. Arsenal fans didn't boo at the end of yesterday's game because they're angry. They booed because they're so frustrated. 8 years of failure hurts. And I know they've been in the Champions League for 8 years, Nick, but they haven't won a single trophy.
That's not true, Danny. That's not true. They have won the Wenger Trophy.
They have won the Wenger Trophy.
That is, entrance into the Champions League.
Which is for fourth place.
Yeah, the fourth place trophy, yes.
I mean, Nick, this sort of behavior wouldn't be tolerated by other managers. And the straw breaking the camel's back has to be what has happened in January and February. And you've talked about it a ton, man. And I have too. I told you the first week of January that Wenger would not buy anyone. Did I not say that? And he hasn't gone out and he didn't buy
He did get someone. He got Kellstrom, who he got him on loan, and he was injured already.
He was injured, right?
But look, I don't think you get rid of Arsene Wenger because I think Arsene Wenger has certain facets of his management skill and experience that you just won't find anywhere else. However, and he is Arsenal through and through, even though he's French. Having said that,
couldn't agree more.
The problem with Arsene Wenger is that he has too much control at the club. And what they need to do is they need to bring somebody else in to work with Arsene Wenger on acquiring the players. I'm not even saying that they should sit with Wenger and give their input about which players to buy. Let Wenger point the players he wants and say, I want that one. And then this bloke will go out and try to acquire that one. And he doesn't talk to the Harvard boffins that Arsene Wenger's hired. Wenger's not involved in how much money is spent for this player. Let me give you an example, Danny.
Sure.
Arsenal, for the first time in years, have been in a real position to win the title this year.
Right.
They've been at the top of the table for just about almost 70% of the entire season. They've been top of the table. Right. Pole position to win. We said earlier that the title was theirs to lose. January opens. They have some glaring shortfalls. They need a big, tough, tackling midfielder that can break up the opposition, that can sit in front of those back four and really slow things down on the counterattack. That's what they need. Did they find that guy?
No, of course not.
They also need another striker to help out with Giroud. They need more attacking prowess up front.
Berbatov was right there. He was there for the taking.
So they're looking at the following players. Julian Draxler, Mario Mandzukic, whatever, you know what I mean. Diego Costa, Mario Balotelli, who I think, by the way, Balotelli will come over in the summer, but that's a different matter. So they were very, very close to Draxler, who, while not exactly the type of player they want, Wenger was convinced he could switch Draxler from being more of a sort of winger to being an out-and-out striker, which I think he probably can because this kid's really, really, really good. They wanted $37 million for Draxler. The Arsenal board agreed and said they would back Wenger with whatever he wanted.
Right.
He wouldn't pull the trigger because he only valued him at £34 million. He let £3 million in value differential kill a deal for a player they desperately need, not just for footballing reasons, but to let the fans know that they're still in the game. Danny, he wouldn't do it because he's listening to Moneyball. And when I say Moneyball, I literally mean Moneyball. Okay? If you watch that movie, Moneyball, he's really good friends with Billy Bean. These guys hang out together. That's what is going on here, folks.
Billy Bean had financial, he had financial issues to deal with. He had true numbers that affected his team and what they were capable of doing. Wenger has had that for a long time. Now he doesn't. And because of his pride, he's still not willing to spend. I think part of it, Nick, is that the English model of manager and CEO and GM all in one, of the gaffer really running everything and sanctioning the transfers, I think the model's dead. I think that you need a chief executive like we've seen in Spain over the years to come in and make transfer decisions along with the manager, and especially handle the business dealings.
Well,
there is no place in the game for managers to handle these negotiations.
Well, in that regards, I agree with you. But look, here's the thing. Arsene Wenger is the definition of penny wise and pound foolish. And
you love that one.
He got into this mindset when they were moving from Highbury to the Emirates, and he was told that he wasn't going to have much of a transfer budget. He had to make do with what he had because it was very important to the board at Arsenal that they go into their new stadium without carrying a great deal of debt. To his credit, to Arsenal's credit, they did that. To the credit of the fans and the supporters, they lived through that. They understood that they weren't likely going to make big money signings because they were going to have essentially their house paid for. And supporters looked and said that was great. But now, Danny, the supporters are being asked to pay the most expensive ticket in the Premier League. That ticket, by the way, Danny, is going up 3% next season.
Right.
Arsenal just signed
a standard increase, though. 3% is a standard increase.
Not when you have the most expensive ticket existing in the Premier League and you haven't won squat. Okay.
Fair.
Arsenal have a new £150 million deal with Puma. Okay. They are going to bring in, with this 3%, £2.8 million a year more. Last year, they culled 12 players from the squad. They saved another $12.5 million off their annual salary. So what you're seeing here is ticket prices are going up, sponsorship revenues increasing, salary on the team is decreasing. Big transfer kitty. Wenger will not make a move. Danny, I don't understand it. If he had made a move in January, they could have had a chance, a serious chance to win the title. But now I actually think at the rate Liverpool's going, they may finish above them.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Julian Draxler, how much he costs, where he goes, and what his future is like, especially after the World Cup. Let me, right before we go to break here, let me get a couple tweets coming in. Ed Hart at Idaho United says, Arsene Wenger is too spoiled by his bosses to change his tune to how he assembles his team for the long run. Spoiled by his bosses. And I think I know what Ed means there. He just has too long of a leash. Bernie Wilkinson, a Chelsea supporter, says the problem is Wenger is like a slot machine. You never know which pull will be a winner, and most pulls are disappointing. I like that one.
Yeah.
Really, you look at a lot of his transfer policy in, selling Nasri, and I think the Van Persie deal was actually a good deal. But the manner in which Fabregas left, the players that they have brought in return, it just doesn't add up to me, and it's unfortunate because I like the way Arsenal have done things, but I don't like, obviously, Wenger's transfer policy. I agree with you.
Because, Danny, they can invest in a stadium, but they're not prepared to invest in players. That's a problem. Because if you don't invest in players, you can have the nicest stadium. You may as well be Leeds United.
Oh, wow. Bringing up
Ellen Road,
we talked about them on the show.
All right, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to switch continents. Let's talk Major League Soccer. I know everyone's excited about that, and quite honestly, so am I. So much to get to as we get ready for the new league, the new season. Good stuff. All right, we're going to be joined by Kyle McCarthy from the MLS Editor at FoxSoccer.com. Nick and Danny with you. We'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
You're up.
All right, this music makes me want to like cover myself in neon sparkly stuff and dance under the lights.
We dance under the lights.
Welcome back to the show, World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline USA. Dance naked, that is. I'm Nick, he's Danny.
Hey.
And we're on the Sports Byline USA Radio Network each and every weeknight, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, Danny, we've been threatening we're going to do it. And, of course, there's no better time than right now because we are literally weeks away from the start of the new Major League Soccer season. Things are heating up. We've got all sorts of backstories to talk about. So it's time to put the Premier League aside and to take a dive into the deep end of Major League Soccer. Joining us to do this is, for the first time, a special guest, Kyle McCarthy, who was the MLS editor at foxsoccer.com. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, Kyle, before we're going to start. As Danny said, we'll start with the softies, and then we're going to get into some of the controversial issues here as the show goes on. But give us a sneak peek ahead to the season. How do you see things unfolding? How do you think Portland are going to do? Seattle, the Galaxy, are they going to be a powerhouse? What's happening on the East Coast? Fill us in, Kyle. Fill us in. We're ready.
Well, I'm glad you're ready, and I think the focus for the start of this season is going to be on preparing for the World Cup. The U.S. has a lot of players in its potential squad in MLS, so there's going to be a lot of attention paid to those guys and how they're able to get themselves into form heading into Brazil. And once the World Cup passes, I think then you'll start to see the focus shift back to those teams, shift back to Portland and Seattle and L.A. and Real Salt Lake, defending champions, Sporting Kansas City, New York, Toronto FC obviously going to draw some attention as well with the moves they've made this offseason. So I think when you look at MLS this year, you have to focus on the league into the World Cup, and then sort of process how that unfolds and moves on toward the second half of the season.
Yeah, kind of two very defined halves of the season, not necessarily split by the All-Star break this time, really split by the World Cup.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And obviously in a World Cup year, everyone's focused on the big stage, the massive tournament, and the investment that MLS has made in those returning American players. When you're talking about Michael Bradley and Clint Dempsey and keeping Landon Donovan and Omar Gonzalez, when you make those sort of outlays, you're inevitably going to shift the focus away from the teams a little bit and toward those big stars. And a lot of the scrutiny in the first half of the year is going to be on how those guys are playing and how they're getting themselves ready for the World Cup. So I think it's a natural line of demarcation where the league is really focused a lot on the international scene at the start and then shifting back toward its domestic concerns as the year progresses.
Kyle McCarthy, our guest here, the MLS editor at Fox Soccer. Kyle, obviously here on World Soccer Radio, when news came down of players like Michael Bradley and Maurice Edu, Clint Dempsey a long time ago, earlier last year, staying in MLS, we had our own reaction. Fans had their own reaction. But for someone like yourself, who is the MLS editor of Fox Soccer, who covers the league hours upon hours every day, what's kind of the inside opinion of these big moves for American players?
There are a lot of people in this league that are torn about the decision to spend this sort of money on these players. On the one hand, I think there's a consensus that has emerged about the utility of bringing these guys back. It's good for MLS if Clint Dempsey is in the league. It's good for MLS if Michael Bradley is playing in Toronto. The question that a lot of people inside the league have is how the league is going to adapt to the fact that it looks like there's a separation emerging between teams that are able to go out and spend that sort of money to go out and get a Clint Dempsey or a Michael Bradley, and the teams that can't. And MLS over the years has relied on its single entity structure and has really focused on the parity within the league. And with the amount of money that's been spent over the past 6 to 12 months, there's a question about whether that parity is going to persist over the next few years. Obviously, when you look at how MLS Cup turned out with Sporting Kansas City playing Real Salt Lake in the final, that's a sign that the old way of doing things still exists. but there is some genuine concern about whether this arms race that's emerging will have a significant impact on how this league functions going forward.
Kyle, you bring up a really interesting topic that we could
Yeah.
probably really just sit down and discuss over at least 2 or 3 shows. But, you know, you talk about parity, and from the way I look at this, and I view the league, and I've watched the league since its inception. I've watched it grow. I've been very bored by it early on, as it really didn't offer me much, and to where it is today, where I think it's a vibrant, terrific league, is really good stuff. But you know, one of the problems I have with parity is that it kind of makes each season a reset. The flip side of it is parity really protects those smaller market teams. If we start to move away from parity, it's going to create problems for those smaller markets teams that just don't generate that much revenue.
It will. It will. And what it really does is reduces the margin for error.
Yeah.
There isn't a large margin for error to build a decent MLS team as it is, with the salary budget and with the strictures it imposes. So if you're a smaller market team and you can't afford to go out and spend $6 million a year on Michael Bradley or someone of his caliber, you have to get your decisions right at the lower end of the transfer market. You have to go out and sign a guy for $300,000, $400,000, and you can't afford to miss, because if not, you're not going to be able to keep up with those teams. And for MLS clubs, they've done a very good job of being efficient in the transfer market. MLS has a pretty decent hit rate in terms of going out and signing players for modest funds in the world market. The question is whether they can continue to improve the standard of the league while still functioning there. And the pressures that the top clubs are going to put on the mid-market and the smaller market clubs to be perfect in those areas is going to exert a toll of some sort.
So in many respects, Kyle, I mean, this, for example, this arrangement between MLS and USL Pro is really helpful in both ways. In other words, you can take younger players that you bring in that need more development, and they can play in a competitive league, but also an opportunity to look down at the lower leagues, the lower divisions, and see if there are players that can really make a difference in the top flight. Is that how you see it?
I do see it that way, and I also see it as a natural extension of the academy system that MLS has tried to develop over the past 5 years or so. MLS has invested a lot of money in trying to cultivate young players and nurture them into professionals. And the problem with spending all that money is that they were able to produce some players, but then weren't able to get them first-team games on a regular basis. So now you've got USL Pro, where you have a competitive standard of play, and you can send your younger, talented players down there for some match action, competing against guys who do this for a living, who want to climb up the food chain, perhaps impress a second division club or an MLS club, and climb their way up that way. So I think when you look at USL Pro and the relationship with MLS, that's an important component of what the league wants to do over the next few years to develop players and increase competition within their squads.
Well, I think the next natural question, Nick, if I can jump in here,
please.
is where does that leave the NASL? As far as you see it, where is the feud at this point between NASL and MLS? Is there one? Tell us what's going on sort of behind the scenes.
I don't see it as a feud. I see there's a natural tension there when you look at the Cosmos and what they're trying to do and what NASL wants to do in terms of its development. But I also see some room for collaboration. You've seen some MLS clubs loaning out players to NASL sides last year, and I assume there will be some doing that this year as well, just to get them into the mix at an even higher standard of play than USL Pro. I think there's room for a second division in the United States, and I think NASL can thrive.
But Kyle, let me hold you there. I certainly agree with what you're saying, but Bill Peterson, the commissioner of NASL, has come out to say he thinks NASL should be the Division I team, the Division I league in the United States, and that and when he pitches new franchises, it's very much why do you want to become MLS when you should be staying NASL? We're going to be the next Division I franchise. I mean, the next Division I league. I mean, that's got to create tension.
Yeah, I think it does, and I think that's fair, and I like that sort of ambition. from
Yeah,
the
I
NASL.
do too.
I want those clubs striving to be the absolute best that they can be. Do I think it's realistic for NASL to say we're going to become a Division I league? No, I don't. But it's good that they want to get to that level because I think it fosters the right sort of competition.
Well, did the AFL think that they were going to be a part of the top flight football league back when? I mean, was it conceivable back in the days when there was the AFL and the AFL and the NFL, right? That the AFL would be part of it?
That's a fair comparison, but when you look at how MLS is structured and its reliance on U.S. Soccer and U.S. Soccer's backing of MLS, it's a little bit different in terms of the business relationships that are involved there.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I think we got to go to break pretty soon here, Nick.
Yeah, I think we got a minute. Kyle, listen. Hopefully, can we hold you over to the next segment?
Yeah, sure.
Because coming up, I want to get into specifics of teams. I want to know, who you think is going to be positioned to change things up this coming season. What has surprised you so far? And of course, we have to talk about Miami Spice. We'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the whole David Beckham issue. And I'd like to get your take on something I discussed on the show a couple of days ago about some gossip that Victoria was letting loose with a few days ago, and how I think that might affect the new franchise. So our guest is Kyle McCarthy, the MLS editor from FoxSoccer.com. It's a real pleasure to have him on, by the way, first time, and I hope, Kyle, you'll be joining us regularly. But he will rejoin us after the break, so we're not going anywhere. Neither are you. You stay with us. We'll be right back after the break here. World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline, USA Radio Network. All right, welcome back to the show, World Soccer Radio. Nick and Danny with you. Our discussion this segment, as it was last segment, Major League Soccer as we get ready to kick off the new season, and of course, the American soccer landscape growing and developing. And we welcome back to the show Kyle McCarthy. Kyle, before I hand you over to Danny, who's got a couple questions, I did just want to mention there was something that you said before the break that really just now hit me, and that you said when we were talking about the NASL and MLS and potential bad blood, you said you liked it. You liked the ambition there with Emma. You like the ambition shown by NASL. And you know, the more you think about it, you know, that sort of rivalry will push both leagues to achieve even greater things.
I agree. I think you want to have a second division that has some ambition, a commissioner that wants to lead the league in a good direction, and you want clubs that want to be the best that they can. So I think anything that can push MLS forward is a good thing in the long term.
Kyle McCarthy, the MLS editor of Fox Soccer, our guest here on World Soccer Radio. Kyle, I have a tweet or two I want to read, people with questions for you. But before we get into that, Nick said, okay, we're talking about MLS here in the U.S., but, you know, with the Winter Olympics going on, I've thought a lot about the game in Canada. And it's really incredible to see the way that Toronto FC fans have really re-rallied around their team, the fact that season tickets have almost sold out the entire venue. What is the state of the game in Canada? How are Montreal doing? What's the latest with Vancouver? They're sort of over that honeymoon period now. How's attendance? How's the game in Canada at the moment as a part of Major League Soccer?
I think the MLS component in Canada is strong and thriving. And you look at Toronto FC, that's a little bit of an outlier. That's a club that's spent nearly $100 million to bring in Jermaine Defoe and Michael Bradley so far this winter. And they've really tapped into that fan base and really provided some hope for the first time in a while. Montreal is a place where the club has been quietly successful since it joined MLS. It's a good, strong, vibrant fan base. They've had some ups and downs in the field. They've just named Patrice Bernier captain. They're still looking to acquire some more players heading into this season. But that's a club that's in a decent position moving forward. And Vancouver is another place where the game has been embraced. And the Whitecaps are a popular ticket in that town. But they've had some upheaval, both in their playing staff and with their coaching staff. So Carl Robinson's taken over. He's made a couple of signings as well. The question is going to be how quickly can he bring everything together this year to ensure that the Whitecaps get the sort of success that their resources dictate they should.
Let me read one of these tweets intended for you. Interesting stuff. I mean, those are three brilliant Canadian cities, by the way, and I think the game will thrive there and continue to. Here's one tweet from Nick in New England. He says, looking forward to the MLS talk tonight. What kind of turnaround can DC pull out? What do you think DC United can do? They're always one of the more high-profile teams in the league, but obviously just an abysmal year last year.
They were terrible. When you win 3 out of 34, you have to be pretty bad. And DC just couldn't get things unstuck. And that's the sort of thing where United went in during the off season. Ben Olsen and Dave Casper looked at the board and said, "We need experience." So they went out and got a raft of seasoned MLS veterans to help guide this young group. And I had a chance to visit with Ben Olsen for a few minutes down in Florida last week when they were preseason. And he's hopeful because he now has that blend. He has guys he can rely on who have been there and done it in MLS. You've got Davey Arnaud and Bobby Boswell and Eddie Johnson coming over from Seattle, Fabian Espindola from New York. So you have that component. And then you've got that young emerging core that they've got with Nick DeLeon and Chris Pontius and Perry Kitchen and Bill Hamid. And then when you put it all together, there are a lot of interesting ingredients. The question is, can United pull everything together in time to be the sort of success they expect to be? I think they'll do a lot better than 3 wins this year. How high they go, I think it'll be a matter of how well they gel.
Good stuff. Good stuff. One thing I think that everyone wants to know, too, is about Sporting Kansas City. Yeah. And we love their new venue. It was really incredible to see them win in that fashion. But is this a team that can continue to make deep postseason runs in a smaller market setting, kind of the way Houston has in recent years, and beyond that, prior to that, the way Real Salt Lake did as well?
They can. The key for Sporting is going to be able to keeping that core together. They have two very important players who should feature in the World Cup this summer, Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi.
Yep.
And those guys need to stick around for the long term in order for Sporting to achieve that sort of objective. Now, they've signed new deals in the past 12 to 18 months to place their futures in Sporting's hands. But if they succeed at the World Cup and all of a sudden transfer offers start to come in, then the core of that team's starting to look a little shaky. So I think you have to really focus on those two guys and see how they are developing over the next 6 months before you can really say Sporting is going to be in it for the long term.
And Kyle, I mean, how important is Peter Vermees to keeping that team together?
Oh, he's vital. And he's come in and he has done a great job of acquiring the right players for his specific system. In MLS, the teams that succeed are the ones that identify how they want to play and then go out and secure players who are capable of fulfilling that brief. And Vermees has done that particularly well in his high-pressure 4-3-3 setup. He's got the right group of players for it, and you can see it in the results.
Well, let's turn our attention, if we can, to some of the slightly high-profile franchises these days. Let's start up in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, we've got Seattle, obviously. I mean, I think disappointment all the way around that they didn't go all the way. Of course, they had a late-season slump last year. I mean, what do you think is up Seattle's sleeve as we get ready for the new season?
Siggy Schmid did some retooling during the offseason. I think they needed it. They didn't have the right mix in the locker room. They just weren't the right blend on and off the field to be as successful as they wanted to be. So they've tweaked the formula a little bit. They went out and got Chad Marshall. They brought in Kenny Cooper. And they've made some other moves as well, bringing in Marco Papa and Stephen Fry. And when they go out and do that, they do it with one goal in mind. They want MLS Cup in Seattle. That's the objective. Are they there yet? I don't know, but I like this team a little bit better than the team that they had last year.
Good stuff.
Yeah, team last year was a bit of a disappointment, even with the incredibly high-profile signing that they surprised everyone with late on in the season.
Yeah, and the problem for Seattle is when you go out and make those signings, that's all well and good, and it's great to have Clint Dempsey in your team, but you've got to spend a little bit of time integrating him into the setup. And he came in, he wasn't really that fit, he wasn't really that sharp, and it exerted a toll on that team. It distracted them at the wrong time, and it fed into some of the problems that they were having prior to that point. So now that Dempsey's been there, admittedly he's been on loan with Fulham for a couple of months now.
It hasn't done much.
But when he comes back and when they have everything together for a little bit of time, Siggy Schmid's a pretty sharp guy, and I think he'll be able to sort out some of the issues that he encountered last year.
Well, I can tell you, I used to work with Siggy Schmid. I'm enormously fond of him. He's not just a great coach, a good manager. He's actually a really, really good person. Siggy Schmid is quality in my mind.
Yeah,
and,
he is. He's
certainly
a good guy.
Big favorite of mine. We could talk about Portland, we could talk about LA, but really, let's talk about New York, because that really is the big story. Great season for the Red Bulls last year, winning the Supporters' Shield. The wheels kind of came off the bus after that. Certainly the expectations are high. Can Mike Petke get it done there?
I think he can, and oddly enough, I think he might be able to do it for a reason that is completely different than in Seattle. He's been able to keep that team together. He's tweaked a little bit around the margins, brought in Richard Eckersley and Envy, but this team is pretty much going to come back intact from last year, and that's a big thing for a Red Bulls side that generally has a lot of turnover. And if they're able to really tap into what they were able to do last year and find the rhythm that they had during the regular season, I think this is a team that can be a threat for MLS Cup. There's a lot of talent there, and when you've got top-end guys like Tim Cahill and Thierry Henry, you've got what you need to really make a push for the title.
And you want to, if there's a year to make a push for the Cup, in New York, this is the year. Lay
Right.
down the gauntlet before NYCFC comes in. We just have a few minutes left, Kyle, and I'd love to talk to you about the situation in Miami. I had heard a few days ago that Victoria Beckham went public with a couple of gossip mags in Europe saying that there was no way they were moving to Miami. They were very happy in England, in London. The kids had just got into the school they wanted, and they would not relocate. Kyle, does that change your opinion about the Miami franchise?
I don't think so, because I see David Beckham as more of an ambassador than a hands-on, day-to-day sort of guy anyways. And I think he'll do what he needs to do to maintain brand Beckham and make that club a success. Because if that club's not a success, it comes back on him. And he's not the one to really countenance that sort of misstep when it comes to an investment that significant.
Interesting. I'm not sure that I agree with you on that one, but we'll let time tell. Danny, you got a follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nick, obviously it's what we've been talking about, Nick, that you brought up, are the reports that, Posh Spice was heard, Victoria Beckham, just going back to my youth in the 90s, was said that the family is not going to relocate to Miami. We think that would be hugely detrimental to this team and their following. Do you happen to agree?
I can understand that point of view. I don't necessarily believe it, because I think when you have David Beckham, you have the sort of attention that sort of masks over that sort of stuff. Obviously, there's going to be a debate about it in the dialogue, and it's always better to have a locally based owner. But if you've got David Beckham on your side, that's a significant advantage, and that outweighs any sort of detriments to him perhaps still being based in London.
All right, well, we'll wait and see. Kyle, just a couple minutes left. Give me your early season favorite picks in the West and the East in MLS 2014-15 season.
Well, in the East, I like New York because they won't have some of the distractions that Sporting Kansas City will have early in the season. I think that's a side that's going to be at or around the top. And when you look out West, I like the LA Galaxy. I think that's a team that will be in good shape. Bruce Arena has made some savvy signings during the offseason, as always, and they have all of the pieces in place to really make a run in a conference that's going to be very congested and very crowded at the top.
Interesting. Well, we will watch it happen, and Kyle, hopefully you'll want to be a regular part of our discussion here on Major League Soccer. It's great having you on, a real pleasure. Enjoyed the discussion enormously, and we have to continue
Kyle.
it. Kyle McCarthy from Fox Soccer. You can he is the MLS editor. You can read everything he has to say or think about MLS right there. And you can find him on Twitter at Kyle J. McCarthy. Kyle, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
A pleasure, a pleasure.
The Guru. Let's do it again soon, man.
Absolutely.
Take care.
All right, World Soccer Radio, Nick and Danny. Danny, I really enjoyed the discussion about MLS. We got to keep it up, though. We got to talk more MLS. Good stuff. It is our league, guys. It is our league. Love the Premiership, and we'll talk about it till we're blue in the face. We got to find time to talk Major League Soccer.
Well, I'll have guests as we lead up to the season, journalists or players representing every team in Major League Soccer as part of our big MLS preview. So it's going to be great once we hit late February, early March.
Fantastic. All right, World Soccer Radio, Sports Byline, USA, 800-878-PLAY. If you've got something very quick to say, because we do have to go to break, and then we come back. We're going to wrap it up here on the Sports Byline Network.
It was. Sometimes you think there was it can't be true, I can't see us really dragging us over the line. Although I have to say, we kept defending well.
still one thing to do. Take down a pub and have a
All right, we're clear.
IRN USA Radio
I lost the sound there at the end, Danny.
A National Security Agency civilian employee resigned last month after
I lost
telling
the sound
FBI
at the end.
he had inadvertently let former contractor Edward Snowden